Hello and welcome back to Assetto Corsa. Thank you very much for joining me in today's video. Now, a few days ago, from when this video is being released, we had the Turkish Grand Prix. Now, it was, in my opinion, a fairly dull race for the most part, punctuated by a few moments of interest. For example, Carlos Sainz overtaking Masterclass, Valtteri Bottas utterly dominating, Lewis Hamilton's disastrous calls, and I suppose Perez's stout defence, Ocon doing the entire race without a single pit stop, and Mazepin being Mazepin. Oh, and whilst we're mentioning Haas, Schumacher getting into Q2 with his pig of a car. Now, through all of that, the one part that I would like to focus on is Hamilton's disastrous stop. And this video, or disastrous stop, or disastrous strategy, should I say, for him. Now, this video is going to be exploring that a little bit, and as you've probably noticed from the title, I'm just going to be rambling a little whilst I drive one of my favourite Formula 1 cars around Imola. I think I've selected Imola. I'm just going to be talking about the idea of computers in Formula 1 during a race situation, or during a practice situation, or qualifying, or I suppose not practice, but qualifying and race, and where I think Formula 1 really is now lacking, and where the spectacle is disappearing. And they're doing all of these weird and wacky things to bring the spectacle back to Formula 1, but I think that there are these basic things that are wrong with Formula 1, and one of them is the reliance on computers to do the strategy, to make the calls, to get that understanding. And that is what I'm going to be talking about in this video. I would like to hear your opinions as well, so sit back and I suppose stay tuned for this sort of ramble, I suppose, about computers and Formula 1, where I think they are going right, where I think they are going wrong, and what really needs to be done to improve this situation and to bring back a spectacle similar to what we have in wet races, where strategy gets thrown out the window because the computers cannot respond fast enough. Okay, here we are out on track, and I think I'm just going to get used to driving. I'm not going to be doing any fast laps, I'll be honest. This is going to be more so just me messing around a little bit around Imola, driving the car around, perhaps spinning a couple of times as I try to get used to this car and track combination. I'm not sure if I feel like I have driven this car track combination before, but I'm not sure when. I'm just going to switch off the reshade as well. Oh, switch off the reshade and not look where I'm going. I feel like I'm not getting the maximum lock out of this car either, but that's okay. Not a problem. Right, so let's talk a little bit about the race and about specifically the call that led to this discussion. Now, I've been thinking about this for a while, to be honest, and wondering about computers in Formula 1 for a while. But to briefly recap, for those people who perhaps didn't see the race, or maybe have already forgotten about the race since this video is coming out a few days after the race, the race was entirely on intermediates. We had a situation where the track was drying, but not fast enough to actually make any impacts on the tyres, enough to put on slick tyres. For example, Sebastian Vettel, I believe, attempted this, and it went onto medium tyres. It went horrifically wrong. He just didn't. He was unable to switch the tyres on, get the heat into the tyres, and get any reasonable lap time. So, because of that, he had to go back onto Inters. Everybody else was on Inters the entire way through. Esteban Ocon, as I mentioned in the intro, didn't even pit. He just did the entire race on one set of Inters and finished P10, which, I'll be honest, not bad, because that means he did still gain positions. Oops, come on. But the one call that I think was interesting is one, when people were pitting, and secondly, when Lewis Hamilton was pitting. Now, with Lewis Hamilton, what essentially happened is that they told him, okay, you need to pit. So he didn't want to pit. He felt like the tyres were in a good enough condition, so he didn't want to pit. Fair enough. I mean, he is the driver. If he feels like the tyres are still working fine, he has that right. And Mercedes perhaps should have spoken to him a little bit more. I know they said, oh, well, why don't you give it one lap and then we'll see after that what you think. I think that the call to pit when Mercedes said to pit was probably around the right time, because everybody else was also pitting in those moments and within those few laps, and Hamilton was deciding to stay out. Oops. I'm really not watching what I'm doing here. I also do not have traction control on in this car. Again! Although this time I can switch it on if I want. So, Hamilton was... that's wide. Hamilton did not pit, and then they continued on, and he was doing decent lap times. I mean, within a few tenths of Verstappen. At one point, he'd drop off to maybe 0.6 of a second, but then it was fairly even for a loss of that stint. Verstappen on newer tyres was not able to open up quite as much as he was hoping. Now, there was no way that Hamilton was going to catch Verstappen, barring something horrendously going wrong. It was pretty much sealed that Verstappen was going to beat Hamilton in this race, but Hamilton could have clinched that third place had the tyres held on. Now, after a while, Mercedes said to Hamilton, oh, you need to pit, and we're going to get you out into some clear air or something. And so Hamilton went, yeah, okay, sure. I think his exact words were, okay, sure. And he came in. I'm not exactly sure why. He seemed to not know that he was going to come out in P5, which is where he came out. So he came out in P5, he asked which position he's in, he got told that it's P5. He had a bit of a rage on the radio, and, well, he finished P5. In fact, I think Gasly was catching him at one point, got to within 0.9 or 0.8 of a second behind him, and I remember the Mercedes team radio where they went to Hamilton, Gasly 1 second, and he just responded, leave it alone, man, just leave it alone. And so he wasn't happy. Now the question here is, what did the computer see that was not taken into account by the Mercedes team? What did the Mercedes computer, or as David Croft called it, the Strategometer 2000 or something? I don't know. Whatever he was calling it, Crofty was on I think he was just coming out with some weird names. But what is it that the Mercedes computer saw that we couldn't see, that Hamilton couldn't see, and that the Mercedes team could only see because of the computer? Because whatever it is, it got it wrong. It seems to have got it wrong. And the question is, because if it was, for example, tyre down to carcass, then surely Hamilton would have felt that, and certainly the team would have said, you've got to pit because it's safety. You've got to pit under a safety stop of sorts. That was a difficult corner like that. But they didn't. They just told him to pit, and he did, and he obviously wasn't happy with it. Once he realised what had happened, wow. I've really got that corner wrong. Traction control, not traction control for the win. It's so much more interesting to drive these cars like that. And that led me to thinking once again about computers and Formula 1. Because clearly the computer got it wrong there because they didn't see anything, but Hamilton kept reporting that he's absolutely fine. His lap times were not suffering. Well, not much anyway. The time that he lost in the pit stop was probably a lot more than the time he lost, that he would have lost if he continued on with his run. Now I think what's happened here is that they thought that if the tyres, or the strategy said, if the tyres go off here, you're not getting out ahead of Gasly. So they said, well, we've got to pit him, otherwise we're going to lose out to Gasly, and we're going to end up being 6th, not 5th. Okay, fine. Not really explained to Hamilton, it seemed, on the radio, and most certainly the confusion there was, how could you be so certain that was going to happen when Hamilton, the lap times were fine, and he wasn't even complaining. He wasn't saying the tyres are going off. Other drivers were saying the tyres are going off, they're having trouble. Hamilton was saying, you know what, it's still drivable, it's not great, but it isn't bad. And I think that is what really frustrated him. Now, the point here that I'm trying to make is that the computer was wrong. The driver was saying one thing. Mercedes didn't want to pay attention to that because they wanted to rely on the computer. Now, let's go to a different example. Our AWS, powered by AWS graphics that we keep seeing. I want to know if anybody's still watching this already at this point in time. How many times has that powered by AWS graphic been correct? Because that thing's supposed to give us all sorts of information. I'll be honest, I don't think it's been correct once. Because the computer does not have enough data to make those predictions. It just doesn't. And yet they still are adamant that you should use this. I do not understand why. It seems to be just like a marketing sort of thing. Because, as I said, I did it again. Is that 2 laps in a row? I know what it is. I'm touching that curb and then... It's interesting. It just seems to be like a marketing ploy. I've never seen that 10% tyre, those graphics say, 10% tyres on this, 20% tyres here, 30% tyres here. Where are you getting this data from, and why does it never really correlate to what the drivers say? The drivers say, this tyre is causing a problem. And the AWS graphic says, nope, it's this tyre. And you're like, no, it isn't. The driver should know better than a computer as to which tyre is actually causing problems. The computer just has sensors that they do not tell the full story. They do not tell the full story in the slightest. So what is going on? The ones that say about this is how many laps they're going to overtake in, and this is what the overtake difficulty is. How do you know that? How do you know that? You do not know that kind of information. It's not available because you're not the human in there. The overtake difficulty could be incredibly easy, it could be incredibly hard. We've seen both situations. But the computer says this is what it does. So, similarly, we have computers telling drivers, the engineers will say, right, you need to hit this lap time to do this sort of thing, you need to hit this lap time to do this sort of thing, and you need to hit this lap time to do this sort of thing. Why? Why do we need that information? So now drivers are driving to these lap deltas instead. Of course, on the other hand, you have the likes of Ferrari, who just cannot put a single strategy correct, it seems. Although they did get Carlos Sainz done well, but I mean, just overall, I don't think they're very good at their strategies. They haven't been for a very, very long time. And it just seems like their computers are all wrong. Either that, or they are the only team using humans to make the strategy, which is why they get them wrong. Because compared to a computer, the human would not be able to find the optimum strategy, but the computer would. So some people are probably now thinking, hang on a minute, so now you have to turn this into an argument for the computer. Not really. Just because a computer can find an optimum strategy doesn't make it a good strategy for the show, for the spectacle. It doesn't make it a good strategy for the sport. So pretty soon, with the way technology is going and the amount of information that we have available with all these sensors and all this data that we have available, pretty soon every bit of information, every possible scenario will have been thought out and calculated by these computers that are capable of doing many calculations every nanosecond, far more than they currently do, within a few years. Literally within a few years. So you're going to have a situation in which the computer cannot be wrong except in the absolute rarest of circumstances. Otherwise it's infallible. So if that's the case, all the mistakes that we currently see from strategies, for example what we saw with Hamilton's strategy this weekend, what we've seen with other strategies, both Red Bull, McLaren, Mercedes, Ferrari, everybody has made this. These mistakes are getting fewer and fewer and rarer because the technology is so advanced that these mistakes do not happen anymore. The algorithms are so correct that these mistakes are a thing of the past. And that's where the spectacle's gone. Because there's no human making that choice anymore. The computer says to do this, so the human goes, right, I'm going to go with the computer. Why? Because if they do not and they get it wrong, they're going to be disciplined. They'll end up in trouble. If they're contracted to look at the data and just say, right, well, this is what the computer says to do, so this is what I'm going to do, and I'm not going to argue with the computer. So if they're contracted to do that kind of stuff, then they will. And at the end of the day, they want to win, and they want to win in the most efficient manner possible. So the only way to win in the most efficient manner possible and ensure you win is to use the computer, because the computer is far less likely to make a mistake than the human. Mistake made by me there going up into that corner proves another point. Well, if that's the case, how long is it going to be before the human in the car is replaced by a computer? That's a big question, because if you want to ensure you win, then you do not do that, that's for sure. If you want to ensure you win, would you not just remove all the human factors? Because that is what they seem to be doing when it comes to the computers. Now, I do like the fact that they've got this extra human factor in the pit stops now. So it's no longer a completely automated system. You have to press a button to get on the jack to get a green light. That's the kind of things we like to see. Pit stops have slowed down. Hey, you know what? It's good. It's really good. Why? Because it makes it more of a sport. It makes it more of a thing where the team has to really practice and put that effort in. That's important. That, in my opinion, is really important, and it helps. I think it helps with the team building. It helps with the spectacle, because oh no, there can be a pit stop mistake. We used to get this all the time when in the refueling era. You used to always have pit stop mistakes because people used to, for example, I remember one instance where Massa drove out the pits with the fuel line still attached. So there was that. There were mistakes where the car used to catch fire. Nobody got hurt. Which is really important. We don't want people being hurt, but it was the mistake. Tyres. A tyre would take much longer to attach, or something like that. Which we still have those mistakes. We certainly still have those mistakes in the pit stop. But why is it that mistakes are limited to the pit stops and to the driver's own errors, which is still being minimised because they're being told how to drive their car? They're being told to do X, Y, and Z, and that's the part that I think we need to really get rid of. So how do we fix this? How do we fix these mistakes like the one that Lewis Hamilton and Mercedes made? Well, I say Mercedes mainly. Lewis didn't really make too much of a mistake. Whether you like him or dislike him, he didn't really make too much of a mistake in that situation. That was not really his fault. He was very clear as to what he wanted. But if we saw those mistakes happening as an everyday occurrence, people would be excited by the spectacle. At any point, their favourite driver could make a catastrophic mistake, or their favourite driver and team, or their favourite driver and team could make a genius move that's going to catapult them up the order 3 or 4 places because they thought about something, not because they plugged the numbers into a computer and it did exactly what other computers do and say, this is the best strategy. No. They thought about it and decided to take a specific risk, a specific gamble, which of course you do still see them doing every now and then. For example, Vettel, that was completely Vettel's call. That, yeah, we're going to try this, and he apologised afterwards saying, yeah, we messed up. But that was his call. I want to try this, and that was clever. That was really clever, and it showed he wanted to give it a go. He wanted to see what would happen. If there were no computers for a race session, what would the drivers have to do? They'd have to say, okay, the team would go, oh, that really hurt me. That was difficult to hold. The team would say, well, how's this feeling? The drivers would go, okay, this is going, this feels good, that feels good. Okay, we don't have computers to tell us anything, therefore we must make this decision on knowledge that we have. We must make this decision on the knowledge that is available to us to be able to figure out what's going on. So, are we going to pit for tyres? Well, we know from the free practice 3 session that the tyres performed like this, or like that, or like the other. Therefore, yeah, I think it's probably worth putting that risk out. That's the kind of thing we want to see. Some drivers would get it right, some teams would get it right, some teams would get it wrong. It would be better. I know people say that we're often nostalgic for the older days of Formula 1 with these sorts of engines, for example, or even older. The reason I think some people are nostalgic for this part of Formula 1 is actually because, in terms of unreliability or unpredictability, should I say, in terms of unpredictability, this was king. These eras were king. You could have a fantastic driver, a fantastic season. A fantastic driver and a fantastic season, but your unreliability back then would really cause trouble. Now, if we keep in the reliability now of the cars, so let's say, for example, all the cars are pretty much as reliable as they are at the moment, but take away the computers, we still add in the unpredictability of when do we stop for tyres. We have to feedback from the driver. The driver has to say, yeah, okay, this is not good now, this is a problem, and the engineers have to be sitting there working at it, going, right, okay, his last lap time was this, his lap time was this, his sector times were this, therefore it looks like he's dropping off at this point in time, it looks like he's dropping off in X or Y or Z, and then get back onto the driver, go, look, looks like you're dropping off here, here and here, what do you think? Is that the tyres, or are you making a mistake, or what? Is it something else? And the driver could say, okay, yeah, the tyres feel like they're sliding a bit, we don't know, and then they have to work out from that, okay, could it be because the driver is pushing the tyres too hard? Could that be the case? Could it be that the driver is the tyres are actually going? Or could it be that they had a very, very hot lap the previous lap, and then this lap they are not quite there, that grip is not quite there, without the computer telling them, without any sensor data, tyres are overheating, this is happening, that is happening, your brakes are Your brakes are doing this, your brakes are doing that. Let the driver figure it out. Okay, maybe for brakes you should have dangerous low temperatures, dangerous high temperatures. Safety, right? So, okay. Your brakes are dangerously low, so you need to heat them up. Your brakes are getting too hot, then you need to cool them down. There you go. That's all the information they should be able to give. Tyres, let the drivers figure it out for themselves. Some drivers will be able to get their tyres into the working window, some will not. And then, outside of the races, so maybe in practice, and in obviously the simulator work they do, and between races, that's where they can perhaps look at all the data. So it still collects the data, it just doesn't allow them to view the data during the race weekend. So, or during the latter part of the race weekend, qualifying and the race. Instead, they have to look at it after the race and then decide for themselves what did and did not go right. And there's their debrief. So they learn between races but not in the race. What does that enable us to do? That enables the softwares to still be used, so therefore people still make their money, because after all it's always going to go down to money. Oh well, this person's sponsoring us, Microsoft Dynamics are sponsoring us, AWS are sponsoring us, or they want, they're providing us a service because we're providing them exposure, etc, etc. It's always going to go down to something along those lines. So these companies will still make a fair chunk of money because their product is still being used. They still require engineers. In fact, you'll probably require more staff now to actually help analyze the data not only on a day-to-day basis between races but during the race, because now there's no computer. You need to put a few people's heads together and really try and figure out who can do what. And you can start hiring people from different skills. Oh dear, not me, that's for sure. You can start hiring people of different skills. So you can hire a mathematician to work on this. He's no computer. He won't get things as quickly as a computer, but he can still provide really helpful, useful information. Or she can provide really helpful, useful information. Hire specific types of engineers, which of course they already do, and then you could just hire a lot of different types of people. Apprenticeships you could do for data analysis and things like that. Get people into it. And I think that really is going to be the way to bring the spectacle back to Formula One, in my opinion, because as soon as that unpredictability comes back, that's when things gets better. Because we've seen it in rain. Every time we have a wet race, the unpredictability is back because the conditions are changing quicker than people can look at it. The conditions are changing quicker than the computer can respond. The computer has a radar. The radar's not always correct, and it doesn't really give us the real track conditions. It's not the ideal track conditions, so they have to try and simulate it as best as they can. The computers cannot really cope with it so much, so they're constantly changing what's going on. The situation's constantly changing. The engineers are constantly having to work at it, trying to figure out, okay, how are we going to improve this? How are we going to improve that? Is this tyre the right tyre? How long is this tyre going to last? How long is this race going to last? What are the lap times? What are the cut-offs? That's another one, cut-offs. Qualifying. We think the cut-off is going to be this, because the computers come up with this information about cut-offs. Averaging, it's looked at data and said, well, this is the kind of lap times that we're doing in practice, this is the kind of lap times that we're doing in practice 1, 2, 3, these were the conditions there, this was the conditions in this situation, therefore this is looking likely to be the cut-off point for this qualifying session. This is likely to be the cut-off point for this qualifying session. Get rid of that. Just get rid of that entire thing. No cut-off points. Drivers have to go out there and drive. And they've got to go as fast as they can because they don't know whether they are going to be safe or not. They can predict, perhaps from a practice session, that okay, well, we saw this driver was doing this kind of speed, and this driver was doing this kind of speed, and this driver was doing this kind of speed. So these are the lap times that we got out of X driver XYZ. So therefore, it's potentially going to be this kind of cutoff, but that's just a guess. And it's not a computer guess. It's a guess by a human being, and that is the important part that we are really missing. I tried to stop that car, didn't work. That is the part that we are really, really missing. You do not want to. You really do not want to lose that. And I think we have lost that a long time ago. Hence why we've got dull racing. Yes, when the drivers are wheel to wheel, it's great, which we've had this year. But why is it that we've had it only this year? So Mercedes, the best car by far for the past few years. I don't think anything has come even close to challenging the Mercedes aside from this year. If the Mercedes was the best car, there would still be a chance for others to keep up, because Mercedes, though with the best car, could make mistakes. Now, what that means is that their engineering has allowed them a little bit more leeway with their mistakes, but they can still make the mistakes, and those mistakes can still lead to others taking those wins, taking those crucial points, tightening up the championship, making it much harder for Mercedes to just run away with it. I don't think any team has ever ran away with the championship for so many years in a row as Mercedes have. And I'm not saying one in a row, because obviously we know that Ferrari won many championships in a row. What I'm saying is the utter dominance, something Ferrari did not have. Ferrari did not have the dominance that people say they did, or people claim that they did compared to Mercedes. Nowhere near. Only 1 year, I think, did they have the dominance that Mercedes are showing, and that was 2002. 2003, I'll be honest, Schumacher had Kimi Raikkonen, a very young Kimi Raikkonen there, and he was really pushing. And if it was not for the reliability of that McLaren, it could have even been Raikkonen's championship. 2006, 2005, 2006, 2005, they changed the rules to prevent Ferrari continuing on with their endless victories. It wasn't that they were dominating massively, but it was the fact that they would just do things better than everybody else. In 2005, we had a Renault win. Ferrari came back in 2006. It was reliability at the end of it that really took that championship. Schumacher, I think, had an engine fail in Australia. Had that not happened, he would have won the championship, even with the tyre delamination that happened in Brazil, which would happen. So if we up the reliability but leave the mistakes, so up the, let's say, the base reliability, so engine, things like that, but leaving the possibility of tyre punctures and the occasional engine blowouts and things like that, it would have been, well, it could have been Alonso that still won. It could have been Michael Schumacher that won that 8th World Championship. Similar, go back to 1999, where cars were a lot more unreliable, but that brought in that unpredictability, and that would, again, I think that could have been a Schumacher championship. 94, obviously, this is where safety comes in. At this very track, we had Ayrton Senna died at this very track. So with that, obviously we do not want those kind of things to occur, and that's why we want safety. So I did it again, I keep doing this. Of course we want safety on these kind of things. Oh dear me. I can't really spin it around right now, because for some reason my lock's not working quite. Ooh, that's bad. My lock's not working quite as I want it to. But yeah, basically, what I think is that the computers have just got too... They've got too involved in Formula 1, and keep them to practice sessions, simulator runs, and in-between races. Qualifying in the race, minimise the use of computers. You can have a computer to do some calculations, but you must put those calculations in yourself, and the calculations must only be basic mathematics, nothing else. So for example, if you wanted to work out what an average lap time over a stint is, you could put those numbers in, just to work out the average lap time over a stint. If you want to look at comparison of speeds through a corner, you could do that. So it just shows you the speeds through a corner every lap. There you go. And you can decide from that. It doesn't tell you what the best thing to do is. It doesn't tell you that this is the fastest way to do this. This is the fastest way to do that. This is happening here. This is happening there. You've got this damage on a sensor here. You've got this sensor showing an engine issue here. This sensor showing a tyre problem here. This sensor showing front end damage. This sensor showing that you've lost a bit of downforce on this side. You've lost a bit of downforce on that side. This sensor showing a 10% reduction on this or that or the other. Get rid of all of that. Here's your situation. That's it. Right, let the driver figure it out. Here's your lap time. Here's the speed the driver is doing, and this is where the driver is on track. This is where other drivers are, and that's your information. Let the driver tell you what the tyres do. If something gets dangerously, to a dangerous point where you've got to tell them to stop the car, then sure, that's where information can also come through. Just flags up as a stop the car. Doesn't even tell you what it is. You can look at it after. It's just a stop the car, and maybe you can say whether it's electrical or whatnot, just to tell the driver to be a little bit safe when getting out the car. So if it's a battery issue or something like that, then they'll say battery, so the driver knows, okay, be careful when touching the parts of the car, certain parts of the car, etc. But aside from that, it doesn't really tell you, oh, stop the car because we've got a failure on this sensor for this thing to do this thing, therefore it could mean that this thing is wrong. No, all that's gone. What are your thoughts? I would really like to hear your thoughts on this. Again, I apologise for the pretty shoddy driving. As I said, I'm not really pushing, I'm just messing around a little bit, going a little bit too hard over curbs, seeing what I can do where, what gears go around where, just really not focusing as such. Just wanted to talk about this, really. Thank you very much for watching. Please remember to hit the like button if you like this video. Subscribe to the channel for more videos on Assetto Corsa. Leave a comment in the comments box below. Let me know what you think. Don't forget to support me on Patreon if you can do so at www.patreon.com/ECGadget. Your supports would be massively appreciated. It would really help me out. And also you can find me on social media at ECGadgetLP for both Twitter and Instagram. That is all from me, and I'll see you next time in Assetto Corsa, where I'm not sure really what I'll be doing in the next video, but I would most certainly, as I mentioned earlier about leaving comments, most certainly like to hear your thoughts on computers in Formula 1. Obviously this was a bit of a ramble, I didn't really cover everything. There's a lot that can go on with computers in Formula 1, but I just think my solution is a fairly good way to bring spectacle back to Formula 1. Practice session, use a computer. Simulators, use a computer. Between your races, use a computer. Qualifying in the race, no computers or very minimal computers. It'll bring back the uncertainty, it'll bring back the spectacle, and it'll just make things a lot more interesting. Thank you very much for watching once again. This is an appalling lap. Once again, I do apologise. I know I did a 1:20 at one point, but I'll see you next time in Assetto Corsa.